Have you ever noticed that life often seems to stand still? That problems pile up, and you feel like you've tried everything, but nothing changes? Well, here's something that might seem unbelievable. The solution may already be happening right now, even if you don't see anything yet. Amazing, isn't it? That's exactly what makes the difference between waiting in vain and seeing something extraordinary happen. This week, God may be preparing something so unexpected, so perfect, that it will completely change the course of your life. And the best part? It's not about effort. It's not about trying harder or running faster. It's about noticing the signs, aligning your heart, and making room for what He is already moving in the unseen realm. Imagine receiving something you didn't even ask for in words, but that perfectly fulfills what your heart has desired for months, maybe years. Does it seem impossible? That's the paradox. Just when you think there's no way out, things turn around. It is a silent, subtle movement that only those who learn to listen to the Spirit can perceive. And that is exactly what we will explore today. How to identify these signs, how to prepare for the surprise, and above all, how to allow it to manifest itself without human effort, simply with the divine touch. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover in this video isn't just another motivational piece of advice. It's something profound, connecting faith, perception, and aligned action. Something that will teach you to recognize the invisible, to trust in the right timing, and to feel peace even before seeing the change happen. And when you understand this, you'll realize that God is never late, but He also never acts without preparing you first. Silence is not absence. It is preparation. This is the week in which God moves in the unseen. I was waiting for a sign, but what appeared first wasn't noise. It was inner peace. It's kind of strange, isn't it? The bills are still there, the problem seems the same, and yet something inside you says, I'm okay, somehow. Generally, it is at this moment that people assume they are out of energy or stuck. But Napoleon Hill would tell you, silent preparation. It usually comes right before a divine surprise. Because when God is about to act, He doesn't always shout. Often, He calms the atmosphere. And here's the not-so-obvious part. Silence isn't emptiness. It is alignment. It's like when a musician pauses before the chorus. That pause isn't insignificant. It's the preparation that makes the chorus more impactful. Spiritually, the same thing happens. Before the door opening, often there is a soft click within the heart, a change in faith, a calmness that doesn't match the calculations. If you've been feeling this way lately, you don't need to overthink it. You just need to notice it. Because the invisible moves first, and then the visible catches up. So, what do you do in practice when you feel so calm? You stop fighting the silence as if it were an enemy, and start using it as a tool. 5 minutes a day, phone screen down, shoulders relaxed, slow breathing, and then a simple question. God, what are you preparing for me? You write a sentence in a notebook, something like, I received a surprise from God this week. Not like magic, but rather like focus. Because when the mind stops panicking, it finally listens to the guidance. And that's exactly when the next piece appears. Usually in the area it has been trying hardest to control. When you let go of the control, the invisible begins to work. At a certain point, you notice something subtle, the divine surprise. It never appears where there is tension. It appears where there is relief. The funny thing is that most people pray asking God to act, but remain glued to the steering wheel as if, okay, God help me, but my way. Napoleon Hill would say, faith only works when hands loosen their grip. Control generates noise, delivery creates space, and space is where alignment it happens. Imagine trying to receive a gift with clenched fists. No matter how generous the giver is, If their hands are closed, nothing falls. Life works the same way. When he finally admits it, "I don't know how to solve this anymore," that's not weakness, that's maturity. This phrase is often the gateway to opening the door. This logic couldn't have predicted it. And yes, this often happens. This week, not a vague someday in the future. The practice here is simple, but not easy. You choose one area: money, relationships, direction, just one. And for 7 days, you stop forcing results in that area. No excessive explaining, no chasing after things, no mental rehearsals at 2 a.m. Instead, whenever the urge to control arises, you replace it with a short phrase. "I did my part. Now I trust the process." This is not passivity. It's strategic surrender. And once this change takes hold, something unexpected begins to happen behind the scenes, usually involving people, the right timing, or conversations he hadn't planned. Surprises almost never come from the obvious place. This is where most people go wrong. They expect that divine surprise come from the most logical source. The same people, the same paths, the same strategies. But if there's one pattern I've seen over the years, it's this: God avoids the obvious when he wants to be unmistakable. If it came from the expected place, the mind would claim the credit. Then he redirects. Different person, different moment, different door. And suddenly, boom, alignment. It only makes sense after it happens. Think of it this way. Life rarely changes because of an obsessive plan. It changes because of a conversation you almost missed, a message you almost ignored, an invitation that, at first glance, didn't seem important. That's why awareness is so important. When surprise approaches, distractions increase, routine seems monotonous, and the extraordinary hides in the ordinary. Napoleon's advice is simple. Don't underestimate the small signs. They often carry large loads. So what do you actually do with that? You slow down your reactions enough to notice patterns. You listen twice as much as you talk. You say yes to something you would normally reject. Coffee with someone, applying for something you feel almost ready for, revisiting an old idea with a fresh perspective. No rush, no pressure, just presence. Because when the open door, when it finally reveals itself, it usually comes wrapped in something familiar, but with a completely new outcome. And this realization silently prepares you for what the next shift will demand. Peace comes before the answer, and almost no one realizes that. Here's a detail that most people ignore. Peace, before the phone call, the money, the opportunity, or the explanation, a strange emotional shift occurs. You feel lighter without knowing why, less reactive, less desperate. Napoleon would say this is no coincidence. It's alignment happening. When the internal resistance decreases, the system is ready for a divine surprise, and that's why this phase is usually confusing rather than exciting. The tricky part is that the mind wants proof before relaxing, but life works the other way around. Relaxation is proof that something has already happened. Think of it like the tide. You don't see the wave forming in the ocean, but you feel the force of the current changing at your feet. The mechanism is the same. When peace arises unexpectedly, it's not about emotional laziness. It's a sign that something, the opening of the door, it was approved somewhere beyond what is visible. Therefore, the practical measure here is awareness, not action. You don't rush to do anything new yet. Instead, protect this peace as a fragile signal. Fewer online arguments, fewer draining conversations, stricter boundaries to avoid negative cycles. Even 10 minutes of intentional silence, no scrolling, no background noise, helps stabilize this inner state. Because, once peace is established, the next event doesn't need force. It arrives naturally, cleanly, almost casually. preparing the ground for the next change that will require courage, not effort. When the right people move without knowing why. This is where things get interesting. Most great discoveries don't happen like a bolt from the sky. They occur through people. Decisions change. Hearts soften. Messages are sent at unusual hours. And the most curious thing? The people involved often have no idea that they are part of it, something of divine surprise. Napoleon Hill. I would say that this is how the invisible becomes visible. God influences choices, not headlines. And when that starts to happen, everything seems strangely coordinated, like gears fitting together. You might notice someone contacting you just to see how you're doing, or an old contact suddenly remembering your name. It doesn't seem dramatic, but it's accurate. The timing is right. The words are received differently. This is usually a sign that something is happening, that there is a opening the door. You are being treated externally while you are being prepared internally. And yes, this tends to speed up the process. This week, because the momentum grows silently before manifesting itself publicly. So, what's the smart strategy here? You remain receptive, not reactive. You respond to messages with presence, without rushing. You engage in conversations without rehearsing the outcomes. You keep a simple intention in mind: be clear, be kind, be available. That's it. No forcing the issue, no insistence, no need to prove anything. Because when people are being mobilized on your behalf, excessive effort only hinders the process. And once these human pieces fit together, the next phase no longer requires patience. It requires a decision. And that's exactly where the story goes. The decision that seems small, but changes the entire course. At that very moment, something subtle is revealed. A choice that seems ordinary at first glance, but carries an unusual weight beneath. It's not dramatic. No fireworks, no singing angels, just a moment of tranquility in which he feels, if I accept this, things will never be the same again. Napoleon Hill. I would call that threshold moment. After all, the alignment brings peace and invisible movement. A divine surprise, often. It asks for a response, not applause. And that response usually appears in this week when you least expect it. The mind seeks guarantees before deciding, but life isn't based on contracts, it's based on courage. Think of it like crossing a bridge in the fog. You don't see the whole way, just the next page. That's enough. When the door opens, clarity comes after the movement, not before. Many people miss their great opportunity not because God didn't act, but because they hesitated when the action finally became theirs. Therefore, the practical guidance here is straightforward and simple. When the option arises, you ask yourself just one question: does this seem natural or forced? If the feeling is one of lightness, even with apprehension, it's probably the right decision. You don't consult 10 different opinions or wait for the perfect moment. You act calmly, intentionally, and without drama. Because once that small decision is made, the whole scenario rearranges itself around you. And what seemed like a surprise suddenly reveals itself as the beginning of a much bigger change that is already underway. When the result appears effortlessly, and you know it wasn't effort, this is the moment that usually confuses people the most. When the result finally appears, it doesn't come with exhaustion. It comes with ease, no chaos, no desperate rushing. Just a clean result that looks right. Napoleon would say that's how you recognize a true successful job. Divine surprise, it lands without stealing your peace. If it had come by force, it would have come down hard. But when it comes from divine alignment, it fits perfectly into the right lock. You look back and realize something interesting. There wasn't a dramatic turnaround, just a series of subtle adjustments. A conversation here, a pause there, a decision made calmly. And suddenly, the opening the door. It's true. Finances improve. Direction becomes clearer. Relationships change. Opportunities arise. And yes, this happens frequently. This week, right after he stopped trying to make it happen. See? Effort strengthens muscles. Alignment moves the world. So what do you do when this happens? You don't rush to tell everyone or immediately plan your next achievement. First, you acknowledge it, internally. Gratitude solidifies the result. Then, you ask yourself a silent question. What does this make possible now? Because this surprise was never the finish line. It was a confirmation. Confirmation that the process works, that trust wasn't wasted, and that the next level won't require more strength, just an even greater willingness to stay aligned. And this realization, naturally, opens the way for the final change that ties everything together. The surprise wasn't the end, it was a sign that the cycle had changed. At this stage, you begin to perceive something bigger than the result itself, the environment. The atmosphere around him feels different. Reactions change. The same situations no longer affect him in the same way. The surprise that arrived didn't come alone. It brought a new inner atmosphere. When God moves, He doesn't just fix one thing. Hasseason restarts. A divine surprise. It's the receipt that proves a more profound change has already occurred. What most people don't realize is that this has nothing to do with luck or timing. It has to do with alignment becoming permanent. Before, peace came and went. Now it lasts longer. Before, clarity was rare. Now decisions seem easier. That's how you know that. The gates of heaven opened. It wasn't an isolated problem, it was structural. And yes, it often starts that way. But its impact extends quietly into the following months. That's why wise people don't rush into things after a revolutionary discovery. They seek stability. Therefore, the wisest attitude here is simple awareness. He begins to protect this new rhythm instead of testing it. The same habits that once caused noise now seem out of place. Less overthinking, fewer emotional reactions, more intentional mornings. Even small anchors help. Waking up without rushing. Reviewing priorities on paper, choosing constructive conversations instead of draining ones. Because once a cycle changes, maintaining it matters more than celebrating it. And this awareness naturally prepares him for the final realization, the one that reshapes everything that came before. True learning, repeating the process, not the result. Here's the unspoken truth most people ignore after a major achievement. What changed their life wasn't divine surprise in itself, but the path that it happened. Results come and go, but the processes accumulate. If you chase the result, you will remain anxious. If you learn the pattern, you will remain free. And the pattern is now clear. Silence, liberation, alignment. Small decisions, then an open door. At the right time. You begin to realize that you can recreate this state of purpose. Not by forcing miracles, but by creating the conditions. Less noise, fewer hasty reactions, more presence, more confidence. It's like learning to sail. You don't control the wind, but you completely control how you position the boat. And when it understands this, it stops fearing periods of drought. Because it knows that when peace returns unexpectedly, movement doesn't take long to follow. Sometimes this week, sometimes right after. The practical integration here is almost tedious, but powerful. You establish a non-negotiable daily pause. 5 minutes. No cell phone. No planning. Just breathe, observe, and ask yourself an essential question. Where am I pushing too hard? And where can I align myself? That's it. Over time, this reprograms your response to uncertainty. And when it becomes a habit, surprises stop seeming random and start seeming natural, which silently prepares you for the ultimate insight, the one that unites faith, clarity, and drive into a single way of life. Living in alignment changes who you become, not just what you receive. At that moment, something deeper takes hold. You realize that the biggest change wasn't external, but internal. It didn't just solve a problem. It completely transformed your outlook on life. You are calmer under pressure, more lucid in your choices, and less desperate for validation. Napoleon Hill would explain it simply. When the alignment happens, it becomes identity. Life stops seeming like a battle and starts becoming a dialogue. And that's a completely different way of living. You realize that problems still arise. Of course they do, but they no longer hijack your center. There's a space between stimulus and reaction. That space is power. That's where faith becomes practical, not religious. And once that inner shift happens, everything becomes possible. You feel less scared because you're not going in as the old version of yourself. You're going in as someone prepared, someone firm, someone who trusts in timing without succumbing to passivity. Therefore, the practice discussed here is not about doing more. It's about to be consistent. The same pauses, the same awareness, the same choice to respond instead of react. You treat alignment like hygiene, not like emergency medical care. Because when it becomes a lifestyle, surprises no longer seem like miracles. They seem like consequences. Natural results of a life lived at the right frequency. And this awareness silently completes the arc, preparing you to hear the opening words of this story from a completely new perspective. When you understand that God doesn't rush, but is never late. At this very moment, the final understanding falls into place. You realize that urgency was never faith. Trust existed. God doesn't rush deadlines, but He doesn't miss them either. The delay is often nothing more than disguised preparation. As soon as that happens, anxiety spirals out of control. Divine surprise. She wasn't late. She arrived. Exactly when you were ready to receive without breaking inside. That's what real is, alignment. Looking back, the signs were always there. The silence that prepared the ground. The peace that came first. The people who mobilized. The small decision that opened the doors. None of this was random. It was something complex, intentional, almost surgical. And when you understand this rhythm, you stop asking questions. Why didn't this happen before? And starts asking, who did I need to become first? This change alone alters how he approaches each future season, including the next one, which may begin this week. Again, in a different way. The integration here is subtle, yet powerful. You replace urgency with expectation. Not passive waiting, but grounded trust. You live knowing that when things calm down again, it's not punishment, but preparation. When peace arises without explanation, it's not coincidence, but coordination. And with this awareness fully established, you're no longer following signs, you're recognizing patterns, which closes the cycle and prepares the ground for the initial words that have framed this entire journey from the beginning. Surprise turns into testimony when you learn to recognize the movement. Now the circle closes. He understands that what once seemed too personal to share becomes direction for others. Without preaching, without showing off, just clarity. Napoleon Hill would say that's when wisdom matures, when experience ceases to be ego and becomes service. God, He never intended to break you. His goal was to teach you how the movement works, so that you could recognize it again, and help others do the same. You notice how your language changes. Less hostility, more discernment. Less why me, more what is being formed here. That's where alignment becomes, it's contagious. People don't follow explanations, they follow stability. And when someone lives anchored, doors don't open on their own for that person. Door openings, they begin to appear around them. Not because they are special, but because they are legible, consistent, internally organized. Therefore, the true practice now is awareness with humility. You don't force meanings on everything, but you also no longer ignore patterns. When peace comes first, you honor it. When silence settles in, you respect it. When a sign appears this week, or anything else, you listen before dismissing it. Because now you know, God's movement isn't noisy, it's precise. And recognizing that precision is what quietly transforms a simple surprise into a way to move forward throughout life. So now that you understand how silence, peace, and alignment prepare the ground for divine surprise, the big question is, what are you going to do with it? Will you continue trying to control everything, or will you allow the invisible to work in your favor? Think of an area of your life where you've been holding on too tightly, trying too hard, explaining too much. Imagine letting go a little, trusting more, and noticing the signs that are already arriving. Remember, every small decision you make makes a difference. Making room for opportunities, listening attentively, saying yes when you feel aligned. All of this is part of the process. And if you practice this daily mindfulness, you'll notice that the signs become clear, the movements happen naturally, and the surprise that seemed distant approaches faster than you imagine. Now I want to challenge you. Share in the comments an area of your life where you will let go of control this week. It will be inspiring to see other people sharing their experiences and to realize how the universe, or God, begins to move the pieces in unexpected ways. Ask yourself, am I ready to acknowledge the invisible movement that has already begun? And before we finish, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you won't miss the next videos, which will teach you how to identify every small opening, every door that begins to move, and every sign that prepares something big in your life. Change begins with perception, presence, and conscious action.